A sad example of this is I had the privilege, and it was a really good time working with Brad Pitt as the voice of the lead character in Sinbad. And Brad Pitt came in after a Halloween. This was about 8 years ago or so. And he was very upset because he had tried to go trick-or-treating with his niece and nephew. And he put a sheet over his head and cut 2 eye holes, and he would walk to the sidewalk and let the niece and nephew run up and trick-or-treat. And they would come back, and he literally, the second house in Van Nuys, kids came back, and he began to walk down the sidewalk, and the woman in the last went, "Brad Pitt!" They recognized Brad because of the way he moved. And I'd challenge sort of all of you, if you haven't done it already, try that sometime. Try that distant vantage point and see how many people, just by the way they move, really give you their identity. So, the mind of an animator. We had a very interesting sort of challenge as we approached the third film I directed, Over the Hedge. I really felt like we were seeing the limits that 2D animation and the marvelous talents and array of things that were brought to bear in being a 2D animator, it was starting to impinge on letting 3D animation become everything it could be, we felt. And it was my contention that 3D animation actually had more to do with the aesthetic and language of live-action cinematography than it did with the world of 2D art. And I formed this little postulate that I'll share with you now and share quite extensively with you, that there was a difference between additive and subtractive art. It is my theory, and I'll say it's just mine so that you can beat me up about it if you think I'm crazy. But it's my theory that the nature of cinematography and photography is it is subtractive. It is much more about what you do not show as what you do. I'd argue that the nature of most art is actually subtractive ultimately, and I have a couple of favorite quotes. "I'm sorry this letter is so long, but I did not have time to make it shorter," which is a brilliant thing to say if you think about it, and anybody who does writing for a living knows how true that is. Or an even better one here. Oops, I think I just hit twice. Let me go back. There we go. "Perfection is achieved, not when there's nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." I took these things to heart as we were approaching what we needed to do for making Over the Hedge a special-looking film. And there are a great deal of the craft of filmmaking and photography that we were not taking advantage of. And I contended that most of these were because animation is an additive art. Like painting, animation starts with an absolutely blank canvas. There's nothing there. If you want something there, you have to invent it and put it on there. And you put on and put on and put on. And frankly, if you've seen Shrek or Ants, 2 films I was intimately involved with, I directed Ants, it's kind of a Rorschach test of detail. We just kept putting stuff into it. Yet live action sort of does the opposite. It subtracts. So on Over the Hedge, we were saying, what can we do to guide the eye with these principles and aesthetic that we think our audience is bringing to the film? Our audience are not animators. They're coming to watch a movie. And they're going to embrace, I felt, the aesthetic of a movie. So let me get a little pedantic, a little, and talk a little bit about what photography does and doesn't do, the limits of exposure here. The human eye can see the equivalent of 9 f-stops. If you don't know what an f-stop is, doesn't matter, just call it a unit of light. It can see, a human eye can actually see as many as 16 different units of light. Camera, 5, maybe 6. So the first thing a photographer is going to do, beyond throwing out the world by picking a frame, which I would say is a pretty subtractive thing to do, a photographer has to pick an f-stop. And now here's a picture of my office, and it will go through, I believe, 9 different f-stops of the same scene. As a photographer, what do you want to show? Do you want to show the detail of the dark area under the desk? Or did you want to see the leaves on the trees? Because you couldn't get both at the same time. By the end of this run, in fact, I think I can do this backwards and forwards. Let's see. What do you know? I can. I'll let that play one more time. By the end of this, somewhere in the middle, it feels sort of moderately correctly exposed. And by the end of it, we're seeing detail where it was completely dark. So a photographer has to throw out a lot of information. The next thing a photographer has to throw out is focus. You can almost never hold focus on everything in the scene. In fact, one of the beautiful aesthetics of photography is how shallow the focus can be. So here's a few stills taken in my garden. Very, very shallow focus. We go from deep focus very, very shallow foreground goes out. Or my favorite one here, where we take a look at these toys in a backyard patio, and then we choose a very shallow depth of field. I would argue that this is actually in many ways a more pleasing image than the first one. And it's because we've thrown away information and guided the eye, and we've created these beautiful smears of color. I desperately wanted those effects in Over the Hedge. The very first image we generated on Over the Hedge was this one of Vern, and it was new software that created these circles of confusion, or my favorite word, bokeh, B-O-K-E-H, which describes the beauty of out-of-focus information in photography. You'll notice, by the way, that Vern had a turtleneck. We decided it was foreskin-esque, and he has a very smooth neck in the final production. But this was the very first image on Over the Hedge, and we tried to do everything I was talking about with photography. Now, I'm going to show a couple of other things that I'll talk a little more about this a little later as well. Here's a color keyframe. In spite of the fact that we're working on the computer, so much of computer animation is still, and delightfully and appropriately, a hand-drawn affair. And so we design our film with a lot of paintings and drawings. This is an example of what we call a color keyframe, a guide to lighters, people who put the light, shadow, texture on computer-animated imagery. And so here's a sample of what it looked like in painting form. And then here is an actual still, and you can see, again, we're applying some of these photographic principles, letting white areas blow out entirely and letting focus be very shallow. Perhaps an even better example, here's the painting that was envisioned to try to guide the computer lighting, and then really quite similar to it, here is the resulting computer lighting. Once again, both focus and exposure have been pushed to places that I'm very proud to say very few computer animated films had ever done. This is a little clip. It's only about 40 seconds long, but I'll challenge you to do the opposite of what we wanted, which is don't look at the characters. Watch, if you will, the out-of-focus background in a nighttime scene. A perfect example of, if it were live action, you would be required to have this sort of shallow focus and this sort of lighting.
This is us.
Can I be the car?
I want to be the car.
I'm the car. You be the shoe.
Shoe is lame.
Why don't you be that snazzy-looking iron there?
Hey, it's not important. Besides, I'm the car. I'm always the car. Now, the plan works in 3 simple steps. Step 1, kill the lights. Step 2, get inside. Step 3, get out with mountain of food.
But this place is like a fortress. Walls so high, doors impenetrable. How'll we get in?
The collar is the key. Literally, the collar. It's like a key that opens the door, and if
And what? You think he's just gonna hand over his collar to you?
Not to me, my femme fatale. To you.
Her?
Me?
Thank you, Stella. You can see that scene. We really pushed things as far as we could. Characters were silhouetted, characters were flared out, and focus was very shallow. And it's, I put this in this category of talking about in the mind because we really had a hard time, myself included, as artists, embracing the idea of throwing information away. In fact, if you were a character modeler or a texture person, you still hate me to this day at the studio because you spent all that time making that shrub look great, and there it is, Mom. Can't even see it. And to this day, it's interesting, the whole studio, DreamWorks, has embraced a sort of attempt to get to a slightly more live-action cinematography aesthetic. It changes film to film as is appropriate, but in general, we are playing in the same sandbox as the feature film live-action world.